Strap yourselves in, because today we're going deep
Yeah.
into Isaac Asimov's Second Foundation.
I love this book.
We're going to be tackling some pretty intriguing questions about this mysterious organization.
Oh, yeah.
Why was it created?
Yeah.
What's its true purpose?
Right.
Who are these enigmatic members?
Yeah.
And how do they even operate in secrecy?
It's pretty wild.
We'll also be exploring how Arkady Darell's discovery, really throws a wrench in their plans.
Yeah.
And we'll also examine whether the Mule is a tragic figure or actually a justified threat.
Oh, that's a good one.
And of course, we'll unpack all the ethical implications of the Second Foundation's manipulation of humanity.
Right.
And discuss, why this story still matters to us even today.
Oh, absolutely.
So much to cover.
Absolutely. It's fascinating, right?
Yeah.
But what I think is so fascinating about the Second Foundation is that it operates on a level most people can't even grasp.
Right.
They're dealing with forces that shape entire societies over centuries, and they do it all from the shadows.
Right. It's like a secret society with superpowers, but instead of fighting crime,
right,
they're shaping the destiny of humanity.
Yeah, exactly.
That's pretty intense. But before we get, too deep into their methods,
Yeah.
let's go back to the basics.
Okay.
Why did Harry Seldon even create a Second Foundation in the first place?
Right. Well, if you recall from the earlier books in the series, Seldon, using his science of psychohistory, foresaw the fall of the Galactic Empire and a long period of barbarism.
Right. Thousands of years.
Yeah, a very long time. And so he created the Foundation as a way to reduce that dark age.
Right.
But he also knew that even the best laid plans could go awry.
Of course.
You know what I mean?
So the Second Foundation was like an insurance policy?
Yeah.
A backup plan.
That's a good way to put it.
In case things went sideways.
Yeah. The first foundation, with its focus on science and technology, was meant to be this visible beacon of progress. But Seldon knew there could be unpredictable factors.
Right.
Things even psychohistory couldn't fully account for.
Like the Mule, for example.
Oh,
He really threw a wrench into things.
he did.
With his, emotion manipulating powers.
It's amazing.
That's pretty wild.
Oh, yeah.
Is that why Seldon created the Second Foundation? To deal with threats like him?
The Mule definitely represents the kind of unpredictable element that Seldon was worried about.
Okay.
However, the Second Foundation's purpose was much broader than just dealing with individual threats.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were meant to be guardians of Seldon's plan,
Right.
ensuring that humanity stayed on the path towards a new empire, even if it meant making subtle adjustments along the way.
So,
right?
yeah. They're like guardians, but also kind of like puppeteers.
That's a good way to put it.
Subtly influencing events to fit Seldon's grand scheme.
Right.
That brings us to the big question.
Okay.
Who are these members?
Yeah.
And how do they actually wield their power?
Well, the members of the Second Foundation are mentalics, trained from childhood to master mental powers.
Wow.
Beyond anything the First Foundation can even comprehend.
Really?
They can influence emotions, plant suggestions, even subtly alter memories. It's powerful stuff.
Basically mind control, but in a much more refined and subtle way.
Exactly.
Than we usually imagine.
Their power lies in being unseen and working behind the scenes.
Right.
To nudge individuals and societies in the desired direction.
Wow.
They might whisper a suggestion in the ear of a powerful leader or plant a seed of an idea that blossoms into a scientific breakthrough years later.
That's both fascinating and a bit creepy.
It is.
I mean, if they're so good at manipulating people,
Right.
how do we know they're actually working towards humanity's best interests?
You're right.
What's to stop them from using their powers for their own gain?
That's a question that has haunted many characters within Asimov's universe. After all, power corrupts, and even the best intentions can become twisted over time. And that's where Arkady Darell comes in.
Right.
She's the one who throws a wrench into the Second Foundation's carefully constructed world.
Right. Arkady, the daughter of a prominent psychologist on the First Foundation.
Right.
She stumbles upon clues that hint at the Second Foundation's existence.
Zach.
And blows the whole thing wide open.
Her discovery is a major turning point in the story.
Right.
Up until that point, the Second Foundation had operated in near total secrecy.
Yeah, it's like a myth.
They were a ghost story, a rumor whispered in dark corners. But Arkady's investigations forced them to step out of the shadows to reveal themselves to the galaxy.
That changes everything, right?
It does.
I imagine it would be pretty hard to maintain the illusion of control.
It is.
When everyone knows you exist.
Exactly. Arkady's discovery creates this ripple effect.
Wow.
Shaking the Second Foundation to its core and setting the stage for a confrontation that will determine the fate of Seldon's plan.
Wow.
The stakes are high.
Speaking of confrontation, we have to talk about the Mule. He's this incredibly powerful mutant
Well, he is.
who can manipulate emotions,
Right.
and he's obsessed with finding and destroying the Second Foundation.
Yes, he is.
Now, was his fear justified, or
Whoa.
was he just a power-hungry tyrant
I think
looking for an excuse to conquer?
the Mule is a fascinating and tragic figure.
Okay.
He's driven by a deep-seated fear of control,
Okay.
of being manipulated by forces he can't understand.
Right.
He sees the Second Foundation as the ultimate puppet master,
Yeah.
pulling the strings of humanity from behind the scenes.
So his desire to destroy them was almost an act of rebellion,
Yeah,
a way of striking back against the idea
you see it that way.
that our destinies are preordained.
And it raises a fundamental question about the Second Foundation's methods.
Right.
Are they truly working for the betterment of humanity, or are they simply imposing their own will on the galaxy?
That's a pretty heavy question.
It is.
And it makes me wonder,
Yeah.
is there a line between benevolent guidance and outright manipulation? Does the Second Foundation's pursuit of a better future justify their secretive controlling tactics?
These are questions that Asimov wants us to grapple with.
Right.
And the answers aren't simple.
Yeah, for sure.
But before we get too deep into the ethical debate,
Yeah.
let's shift our focus to the practical side of things.
Okay.
How does the Second Foundation actually go about shaping events on a galactic scale?
What-
What are their methods?
How do they do it?
How do they pull this off?
It's mind-boggling.
It is. The Second Foundation's methods are incredibly subtle and rely heavily on their understanding of psychohistory.
Right, we've touched upon psychohistory before, but could you remind me?
Yeah.
How it works?
Sure.
It's not exactly like everyday psychology. but-
Right, you're right. It's far more complex.
Yeah.
Imagine being able to predict the behavior of billions, even trillions of people with a certain degree of accuracy.
Right.
That's what psychohistory attempts to do.
Wow.
It's a statistical science analyzing societal trends and predicting the probability of various outcomes.
So it's less about predicting what any one individual will do and more about understanding
Exactly.
the overall flow of events on a massive scale.
Precisely, and that's where the Second Foundation's mentalic abilities come into play.
Yeah.
They use psychohistory to identify key moments, influential individuals, and potential points of disruption.
Right.
Then they use their powers to make small adjustments,
Okay.
nudging things in the right direction.
It's like they're playing a cosmic game of chess.
Yes.
But instead of moving pieces,
Right.
they're subtly influencing people's decisions and actions.
That's a good analogy. And just like in chess, even a small move can have cascading consequences down the line.
Wow.
The Second Foundation isn't looking for quick wins.
Right.
They're playing the long game, sometimes manipulating events that won't have a noticeable impact for decades or even centuries.
This brings up a fascinating point.
Yeah,
If their manipulations are so subtle,
right.
do the people being manipulated even realize what's happening?
That's one of the most unsettling aspects of the Second Foundation's power.
Right.
Their influence is often so deeply ingrained that people believe they're acting on their own free will, when in reality their thoughts and emotions have been carefully guided.
It's almost like they're planting seeds of ideas or emotions
Exactly.
that grow over time, shaping people's decisions without them ever realizing where those impulses originated.
Exactly. Asimov provides a chilling example of this with the religion of the traders.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember that incident?
I recall the traders being a group that became increasingly isolationist,
Yes.
but the details are a bit fuzzy.
Okay.
Could you refresh my memory?
Of course, the First Foundation was rapidly expanding, establishing trade routes and alliances with various planetary systems.
Right.
This expansion, while seemingly beneficial, was actually putting Seldon's plan at risk.
Okay.
It could have led to unforeseen conflicts and destabilized the delicate balance Seldon had envisioned.
So the Second Foundation needed to intervene,
They did.
but they couldn't just waltz in and tell the First Foundation to stop expanding.
Right.
That would have blown their cover.
Exactly. Secrecy was paramount.
Right.
So they did something much more subtle.
Okay.
They planted the seeds for a new religious movement among the traders. This religion emphasized pacifism, self-sufficiency, and a withdrawal from the wider galactic scene.
So instead of directly intervening,
Right.
they created a belief system that achieves their aims.
Yes.
That's incredibly clever and a bit terrifying.
It is the traders believing they were acting on their own spiritual convictions, began to withdraw from their trade alliances,
Wow.
effectively slowing down the First Foundation's expansion and preventing potentially disastrous conflicts.
It's social engineering,
It is.
but on a galactic scale. And it
Exactly.
makes you wonder what other seemingly random events or societal trends
Right.
might have been orchestrated by the Second Foundation.
That's a question that lingers throughout the novel, and it forces us to consider how susceptible we are to manipulation even when we believe we're making our own choices.
It's a chilling thought, but it's also a reminder to be critical thinkers, to question our assumptions, and to look for those unseen forces
Right.
that might be shaping our perceptions.
Exactly.
But getting back to this story, this revelation about the traders raises a big question.
Yeah.
If the Second Foundation is so powerful, why was the Mule such a threat to them?
Right.
He wasn't a mentalic.
Right.
So how could he possibly disrupt their plans?
The Mule's power wasn't mental in the same way as the Second Foundation's.
Yeah.
He couldn't read minds or plant suggestions.
Right.
However, his ability to manipulate emotions was incredibly potent, and ultimately emotions are the driving force behind many of our decisions.
So he could sow chaos, create distrust, and ultimately turn people against the Second Foundation, even if they didn't fully understand why.
Precisely. He could manipulate leaders, spark rebellions, and even make people doubt their own senses. His power was emotional, but in a galaxy where emotions often dictate actions, that made him incredibly dangerous.
That's a fascinating point, it seems, that even with all their mental prowess,
Right.
the Second Foundation couldn't fully account for the raw power of emotions.
It's true.
And speaking of power, their whole mission hinges on the idea of remaining hidden.
Right.
What happens when their existence is exposed?
Yeah.
Like when Arkady Darell starts uncovering their secrets.
That's the central conflict that drives the second half of the novel.
Okay.
The Second Foundation's power relies on secrecy.
Right.
Their manipulations work best when people are unaware they're being influenced.
Right.
But once their existence becomes known, their effectiveness is diminished.
So their strength is also their weakness.
Exactly.
It's a classic double-edged sword.
Exactly, and that's precisely why the Mule was so determined to find and destroy them.
Right.
He knew that if he could expose them, their power would crumble, and remember, even though he didn't possess the same kind of mental abilities, his control over emotions made him a formidable opponent.
So the Mule, in a way, represented the chaos
Yes.
that the Second Foundation was trying to prevent.
He was a wrench in the works.
He was a reminder that even the best-laid plans can be disrupted
Exactly.
by unforeseen forces.
Precisely. But the Mule's story isn't just about destruction.
Cool.
It also touches on the themes of control manipulation and the yearning for freedom.
Right.
He was, in a sense, a tragic figure driven by a fear of being controlled, a fear that was in some ways justified given the Second Foundation's existence.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder, is there a way to achieve a stable and prosperous future without resorting to manipulation, even if it's for the greater good?
Hmm?
Is there a path that balances order and individual freedom?
That's the big question Asimov leaves us with.
Right.
And it's a question that resonates even more strongly today. We live in a world where information is power, where technology allows for subtle and pervasive forms of influence.
Right.
We have algorithms that shape what we see, news feeds that filter our reality, and political campaigns that manipulate our emotions.
So in a sense, we're all living in a kind of Second Foundation experiment,
That's a good way to put it.
where the lines between truth and manipulation are becoming increasingly blurred.
That's a very astute observation, and it brings us to one of the most important aspects of Second Foundation.
Yes.
Even though it's a science fiction novel set in a distant future, it raises questions that are incredibly relevant to our own lives, questions about power control, freedom, and the responsibility that comes with shaping the future.
Right.
But before we get too deep into those questions, there's one more piece of the puzzle we need to discuss, the planet Trantor.
Trantor, the former capital of the Galactic Empire. A world in need and its ruins, a ghost of its former glory.
Right.
What does this decaying planet have to do with the Second Foundation?
This is where Asimov pulls off one of his most brilliant twists. Remember, both the First Foundation and the Mule were desperately searching for the Second Foundation, believing it to be hidden on some remote planet or secret base.
They assumed it would be a physical location.
Yes.
A fortress of mentalic power, right?
Exactly. And for a long time, they focused their search on Trantor, thinking that the Second Foundation might be clinging to the remnants of the old empire.
Right.
But what they discovered, or rather what they failed to discover, was far more profound. The second foundation wasn't hiding in some fortress on Trantor. They had, like, become integrated into the very fabric of Trantorian society.
Wait, so they were just like living among the people, blending in like everyday citizens.
Well, not quite everyday citizens. Remember, we're talking about trained mentalics. But you see, over generations, they had subtly influenced the culture and mindset of the people living on Trantor. It wasn't like ruling or controlling in any obvious way. It was their very presence that shaped the thoughts, beliefs, and actions of the population.
So the planet itself, or at least its people, had become like a living embodiment of the second foundation.
That's a great way to put it. The searchers were looking for a physical location, like a headquarters, when the real second foundation was this dispersed network of individuals woven into the very fabric of Trantor. And this realization was a game changer for everyone involved.
I bet. How did the first foundation and the mule react to this discovery? They must have felt like they were chasing a phantom.
Oh, yeah. The mule, with his obsession with tangible power and control, was deeply frustrated. Here was a force he couldn't pinpoint, he couldn't conquer. It was like trying to fight a shadow.
It must have been a crushing blow to his ego, realizing that true power doesn't always reside in, like, brute force or military might.
Indeed. For the first foundation, though, the discovery was less about ego and more about a profound philosophical shift. They had to confront the fact that they weren't the sole drivers of Seldon's plan, that there was this other force, a guiding hand subtly influencing their actions and shaping the course of history.
I can imagine that realization caused some internal conflict. It's hard to embrace the idea that you're not entirely in control of your own destiny.
Absolutely. There were definitely those within the first foundation who welcomed the idea of collaboration with the second foundation, recognizing their shared purpose in fulfilling Seldon's grand vision. But there are others, of course, who remained deeply suspicious, wary of being manipulated, even if it was for the greater good.
It's a classic dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
Security versus freedom, control versus autonomy.
Mm.
And it seems like there are no easy answers, even in Asimov's fictional universe.
Right.
What about the mule, though? Did he eventually give up his quest to destroy the second foundation?
The Mule story takes a fascinating turn, actually. He eventually comes to terms with the futility of his quest, recognizing that true power lies not in domination but in understanding. He becomes intrigued by the Second Foundation, by their knowledge and their subtle yet powerful methods, and in a surprising twist, he decides to join them.
That's a twist I didn't see coming. The mule, the conqueror, the disruptor, wanting to learn from the very people he was trying to destroy. What brought about this change of heart?
Well, Asimov, as always, masterfully portrays the complexities of human nature. The mule, despite his destructive tendencies, was also driven by a deep yearning for connection, for purpose. And in the Second Foundation, he saw a path that transcended his previous desires for conquest. He realized that true power lies in understanding, in shaping the future through subtle guidance rather than brute force.
It's a powerful message about the possibility of redemption. Finding a higher purpose, even after making grave mistakes.
Right.
So with the mule on their side, does that mean the Second Foundation succeeds in fulfilling Seldon's plan? Is the future of the galaxy secured?
Well, Asimov leaves us with a sense of cautious optimism. The Second Foundation, having weathered the storms of exposure and conflict, continues its work, subtly guiding humanity towards the Second Empire. But he also makes it clear that the future is never entirely predetermined. There's always the possibility of unexpected events, of individual actions that can shift the course of history, even if it's just slightly.
So even with all their planning and manipulation, the Second Foundation can't fully control every aspect of the future. There's still room for free will, for individual agency.
Exactly. And that's what makes Second Foundation and the entire Foundation series so compelling. It's not just about spaceships and galactic empires. It's about exploring the fundamental questions of what it means to be human, to navigate the complexities of power, and to shape our own destinies, even in the face of forces that seem beyond our control.
It makes you wonder, are there Second Foundation type influences at play in our world today?
Well, we already touched upon that idea earlier. Think about the information we consume, the algorithms that curate our online experiences, the subtle nudges from advertisers and politicians. Are we truly in control of our choices? Or are we being influenced in ways we don't fully comprehend?
It's a question worth pondering. As we wrap up this deep dive into Second Foundation, what's the final takeaway Asimov wants us to consider?
I think he's challenging us to be aware of the unseen forces that shape our perceptions, our beliefs, and our actions. to be critical thinkers, to question our assumptions, and to recognize that even in a world where manipulation is becoming increasingly sophisticated, we still have the power to make choices, to shape our own destinies, and to contribute to a better future.
It's a powerful and hopeful message. So thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Second Foundation. It's been an incredible journey through a galaxy of ideas full of twists, turns, and profound insights.
The pleasure was all mine. And until next time, remember to keep exploring, keep questioning, and never stop searching for those hidden truths that lie just beneath the surface.